So one of my viewers asked me if I would watch this video. It's called "Why Has Finland's Far Right Collapsed?" And yeah, I'm interested in finding out about politics in Finland, anywhere really. Like, I always find it interesting to see the state of politics in different countries, see what's going on. This one was quite interesting because it says Finland's far right's collapsed, and that's interesting because in Europe especially you see a growing support for far right populism, whether it's in Germany especially, like we can see here, France, even in the UK with the Reform Party, things like that. You see the rise in immigration, and people are like a lot of the people from a country are moving more to the right who are very anti-immigration. So you see this kind of fight between the two sides. So interested to see why Finland is different from a lot of European countries, and just interested to learn more about Finnish politics in general. It's a subject, yeah, as I said, I'm always like got a keen interest in. So if there's any other good videos about Finnish politics, about political parties, politicians, anything like that, please recommend them too. I would love to see. And let's watch this one.
Rise of populist, hard or far-right parties in Europe has been one of the dominant political stories over the past decade or so. And Finland hasn't been immune from this phenomenon. In fact, at its last parliamentary election in 2023, its own local right-wing populist outfit, the Finns Party, came a close second.
Okay, so I never knew that. So I guess it was an issue in Finland as well, as short as 2 years ago. 20%, and that's actually just, I mean, quite an even split there. Like, how was this growth? How is it grown? Is it grown sharply over the last decade or so? Has there always been a support for it? What caused the rise in that support in Finland? But yeah, I guess it's obviously changed since 2 years ago.
And secured its best ever result. But in the 2 years since the Finns Party went into a coalition government, it has massively declined in the polls.
Okay, we see, yeah, that's like a sharp drop off. And that's what they actually always say. Like, you see they dropped down to like just under 10% or something there. They say with a lot of these things, with these growing supports for right-wing populist parties, once they actually get into power, people find out that they don't actually have much like behind them apart from just these key talking points when it comes to actually running an economy, running education, the different parts of like a country. They don't really have any expertise to do that. So maybe once they actually get some sort of power, and that's obviously what it sounds like they got in Finland, being part of the government there, maybe people just thought, nah, they're not actually capable, something like that.
In the polls, and suffered heavy losses at the recent local elections. So in this video, we're going to take a look at why the populist Finns Party have suffered so much in government. Everyone talks about the left and right of politics, but in Europe there's something new emerging, a new right. In the latest issue of our magazine, we explain this new phenomena and run through some of the elections the new right have been winning. Read more by clicking the link in the description. So let's start with a quick reminder of how the Finns Party ended up in government. The most recent 2023 election resulted in a narrow victory for the mainstream conservative National Coalition Party, or NCP. The NCP ended up forming a coalition government with the narrowly second place Finns Party and 2 other smaller parties. As part of this agreement, the Finns Party were given 7 out of the 19 ministerial posts, with the finance ministry role going to the Finns Party's leader, Riikka Purra. But 2 years on, support for the Finns Party in polling has halved, with the most recent round of polls putting them at about 10%, nearly sinking to 5th place. And this dire polling is reflected in the actual results too. At the European elections last year, the Finns fell to 6th place. At Finland's municipal elections in April this year, they received just 7.6% of the vote and lost more than half of their municipal seats. And there was a similarly bleak picture for them at the concurrent county elections too. So why are voters punishing the Finns Party in surveys and in the polling booth? Well, a major factor here is austerity. Since taking office, the coalition government has pushed ahead with an austerity regime, with the Finns leader Riikka Purra as its public face as finance minister.
Yeah, So how did they decide to put her in that position? Because it seems like almost like it could be a plan, like put her in position, announce austerity, then it looks bad on her and her party as being like the ones who caused that. I mean, I'm not saying that it wasn't. It could potentially be. Maybe she wasn't capable for it. Maybe she was. I don't know her background or her experience. But how did they come to the decision to put someone from that party as in charge of in financing the economy?
Upon taking office in 2023, the government set out a goal of cutting public spending by 4 billion euros by 2027, with cuts primarily targeted at healthcare services and social security. In April last year, 1.6 billion euros of spending cuts were announced, alongside a 1.4 billion euro tax hike. And then this year, they unveiled a further 170 million euros worth of cuts. In order to pull off these cuts, the government have announced an array of measures, including weakening health, social and elderly care obligations, increasing healthcare fees, reducing unemployment benefits, cutting housing benefits, cutting sickness benefits, reducing funding to municipalities, plus cuts to higher education and vocational training.
Yeah, and I mean, not just looking at what this story is about, the far right and so on, like, as just a normal Finnish person, how do you feel about these? How have they affected you? It must be very tough. I never actually knew this was going on. That's quite sad to hear that it's had to get to this point that, there's so many cuts. And these are just like negatively affecting the populace of Finland. So I feel quite very bad for that. Tell me how that's affecting you. Or people you know, things like that.
To name just several of the most contentious moves. The thing is, it's not unusual for governments to make spending cuts, but usually, at least in the European context, leaders will frame the cuts as difficult but necessary decisions that don't bring them any joy. And this is generally how the Prime Minister and NCP leader Petteri Orpo talks about it. However, Finland's finance minister Riikka Purra has taken a slightly different, almost gleeful approach that has sparked backlash. For example, she posted photos on social media of wooden chopping boards with her face on them and the phrase, "Now is the time to cut."
This is what I don't get, is like, how do people get into these positions and just have such a lack of like common sense of the optics of how things look? I feel like if I was a politician, you got to actually like be sensible and, I mean, like, have a heart in this sort of situation as well. Like, so many people suffering, whether it's a small amount or a large amount, like, at least have some compassion. Like, and even if you don't really feel that, use some common sense and like pretend at least. How did people feel about this, or what happened when this was the start?
She also posed holding open scissors, seemingly symbolising the cuts, with fellow Finns MPs in a photo posted by one of them on Instagram. So it's not hard to imagine how those feeling the impact of these austerity measures might find the Finn style of communication a little off-putting. Which brings us on to perhaps the key point in relation to this subject. If you look at polling and the most recent municipal election results, the main governing party, the mainstream conservative pro-business NCP, is polling up pretty steadily, while the populist Finns have collapsed. Analysts point to the fact that both parties have different bases of support, and that the Finns party supporters are more likely to feel the impact of the government's spending cuts than NCP supporters are. Hence why the former is being punished, while the latter isn't. Finn supporters are also more likely to self-identify as working class, and they're more distributed in lower. Supporters are also more
upper middle class for the. Yeah, there's quite a disparity there. Yeah, again, that is like more who these right-wing populist parties do target.
Likely to self-identify as working class, and they're more distributed in lower income brackets than NCP voters are. According to analysis by the Finnish Business and Policy Forum, the Finns party is the favourite of industrial workers, and also has supporters, especially among the unemployed, employees, and lower-level white-collar workers. Now, this is all a bit of a familiar story. The Finns first joined a coalition government back in 2015, which subsequently introduced strict austerity measures, and within a year, support for the Finns had dramatically collapsed, but eventually recovered by the next election after a change in leadership and a dramatic public splitting of the party. But back to the present day, the government has also been pursuing significant labour market reforms, including a weakening of employment rights and scrapping the tax deductibility of trade union membership fees, which has caused friction between the Finns and trade union elements of its support base. In fact, the Finns party's trade union wing has accused the party of embarking on a pointless confrontation with unions, and says that rather than defending ordinary workers, it has simply been acting as a supporting party for the NCP. According to a survey conducted last year by the Confederation of Finnish Industries among its members, support for the Finns among union members fell from 24% to 10% in just a year. Now, it's worth saying that the Finns party has evolved politically over the years. It once self-described as a working-class party without socialism, but it's undergone a significant shift to the right since its split in 2017, after which it became increasingly anti-immigration, nationalist and fiscally conservative. The Finns' 2023 pre-election economic programme was therefore a fiscally conservative document that called for a balancing of state finances through spending cuts. So it's probably fair to say that no one should really be surprised by their actions in government, although the party had been vague about where these cuts would fall and suggested that it wouldn't cut social security. The Finns' time in office has also been marred by a series of mostly racism scandals that have kept it in the headlines for all of the wrong reasons. All of this is combined with the simple fact that despite the government's stated aim of stabilising public debt, growing the economy and boosting employment, the Finnish economy just isn't in a good place. The country's recovery from a dismal few years of economic stagnation and contraction through 2022 and 2023 is being dampened. Its debt ratio is still climbing despite a slower rate of borrowing, and unemployment is rising. None of which is good for a party that controls the finance and economic affairs ministries. And ultimately, the transition from being an anti-establishment opposition party to a party of government is always an awkward one that can reduce a party's appeal somewhat. Meanwhile, now halfway through the parliamentary term...
I mean, that is in a way, but if it just... You can still actually make good decisions that like positively affect your voter base as well, or you can try... Obviously, it's like a bit more difficult when you're in a coalition with a party who has a completely different voter base. Someone's not going to be happy, and if the other party have slightly more power, I guess they will be able to like veto decisions and only try and benefit their voter base. But like, you think that they would just try and work together and try and make as many people happy as possible, but I guess that's just not how politics normally works.
While now halfway through the parliamentary term, the Finnish left and centre have been enjoying something of a resurgence, with the Social Democrats leading the polls and winning this year's municipal and county elections. The Left Alliance also has growing support and has scored an impressive second place at last year's European elections, and the once powerful Centre Party is also climbing in the polls. Like a lot of things right now, this topic is incredibly complex and ever-changing, and here at TLDR, we're committed to learning more to help us understand the world around us. Luckily for us though, our sponsor this week, Brilliant, helps us do just that. We know that learning a little every day is one of the most important things you can do.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, that's a decent insight into the parties who are in power. It's good to see those graphics, to see the change in support of parties throughout the the preceding short term. And yeah, tell me what you think about it. Did you vote for this party? Like, how do you feel about how they're acting now? What do you think is going to happen in the future as well? How do you think things are going to change? And yeah, just tell me how you're getting on. I never knew it was like all these cuts were happening and so on, but I guess it is happening in a lot of countries. But yeah, hopefully everybody's doing okay. Tell me what you think. Thanks.